What's up, everybody? Matt Gajewski here, back again talking college football. And today we are breaking down Florida State ahead of the 2025 season. If you like this content, please hit the thumbs up button, subscribe to the channel. Those two things help a ton for a small channel like this. Even a like, you'd be amazed what that'll do for getting this video in front of other people as we try to grow. So thank you if you've done that. If you have any feedback on Florida State, please let me know in the comments. I'm sure this is going to get a wide variety of responses from people. It's a tough time to be a Florida State fan, but it's not all dark. We'll break it down, as we will a bunch of other teams throughout the offseason before we get into regular season games. But let's talk last year briefly before we get into this year's roster. Should come as no surprise, the efficiency metrics aren't particularly good for Florida State. Really, the only thing that was halfway decent was their special teams unit, and now they're breaking in a new kicker. But there's a lot of equity built up with Mike Norvell. So as we look at these things, there's a couple things to mention. First of all, injuries were not kind to Florida State last year. They basically had them across the board, not just QB. Some people might argue that injury was a good thing with Uiagalelei, but injuries at running back, Roydell Williams goes down immediately, pass catching injuries, offensive line injuries, some on defense as well. So first of all, that doesn't help. Should they have been 2-10 after they were snubbed for the playoff the year prior? Probably not. And they're turning over a lot of their staff. The two guys that are back, Mike Norvell, of course, the head coach, but also the general manager, Derek Ray. And that is a nuanced conversation to have. I'll talk a little bit more about him when we get to the recruiting and talent acquisition. But they diagnosed the problem by turning over the position coaches mainly, which is funny to me because some of them were in place when this team won 13 straight games and won the ACC, only to lose the bowl game. But last year's team at least needs to be dived into a little bit more than that. They only had 2 wins, one against Cal by 5 points, and the other one was against Charleston Southern. They did have single-digit losses to Georgia Tech, Memphis, and Duke, but the rest were blowouts. A lot of those coincided with when the injuries occurred. But on the staff changes, Alex Atkins is gone. He's the one that orchestrated the offense, a lot of it, that won the ACC, and now they moved to Gus Malzahn, who is the former UCF head coach from 2021 to 24. He was previously with Auburn before that. He is sort of the mentor to Mike Norvell, and he's coordinated a lot of good offenses. Generally speaking, he runs an up-tempo spread style scheme. They're fairly run-heavy, and they run some option stuff with the quarterback. And generally, this offense is most successful when it has a running quarterback. Not to get ahead of myself, but Tommy Castellanos comes in. He definitely has mobility. But the only real difference is the offense has thrived when Malzahn has had a larger dual threat quarterback. Last year, they had KJ Jefferson. It didn't work out, but the year before, John Rice Plumlee, and it goes back even further than that. Defensive coordinator, this one I think is a little more defensible. Tony White comes in. He's coordinated an awesome Nebraska defense for the last 3 seasons, was with Syracuse before that. So I'm a little more sold on the defensive side than the Malzahn hiring. The reason I think Malzahn is a good hire is just because his track record is so strong. But I think if you're diagnosing the problem of Florida State coming all the way down to just the OC or just the coordinators, I think that might be a little misguided. But we'll see what Malzahn can do. They're patching together basically a brand new team. But let's look at recruiting and talent acquisition for Florida State. They're a good recruiting team, not the best. Miami definitely has them beat in the ACC, and then occasionally Clemson's jumping up there. Really, it's just Miami that's had their number the last couple seasons. But this is a good recruiting team, not great if you're expecting them to be a national title contender. They're certainly just a tiny click behind the other elite teams, but their retention's pretty good. They're top 3 in the ACC the last 3 years. Their portal activity has also been pretty decent. This is a top 7 team each of the last 3 seasons. But that's where the nuance comes in, because this team has done a good job in certain seasons acquiring talent and then a horrific job at other seasons. For example, the team that won the national championship that had 10 players drafted, we're talking about some pretty good reclamation projects. Johnny Wilson was one from Arizona State where Herm Edwards couldn't figure out how to use him. Trey Benson was a reclamation project because of injuries with Oregon. Keon Coleman, he was a different story. He was kind of dropped into their lap late in the transfer process. But even defenders like Braden Fisk, he was a Western Michigan transfer. Jared Verse, he was an Albany transfer. So the coaching staff and Derek Ray have done a good job in certain seasons identifying talent. However, then you get to last year's class when they bring in DJ Uiagalelei, you bring in Malik Benson, and you bring in a cast of players that were just absolutely not built to win this level of football. So what do we have this year? It's a big question. Their transfer class is top 10 again. I'm going to give them the benefit of the doubt and think this roster is pretty talented overall. So let's get into that roster specifically and talk about who's on the team. Here's our 2 deep. We make this depth chart in this tool. It's available in the Discord. The link is below if you'd like it. Transfers are in yellow. We have the year they are in school, followed by the snaps they played the last 2 years, what star they were in terms of a recruiting ranking, and then a value score, which basically takes your recruiting ranking first, and then the more snaps you play, the less it looks at recruiting, the more it looks at on-field play, which brings us to QB. They moved from DJ Uiagalelei to Tommy Castellanos, former Boston College signal caller. Sort of an unceremonious departure from there. Again, just before we even get into stats, I don't know if he's the best fit for Malzahn because of size. He is mobile, but he's 5'9", 195. Again, this offense generally is working better with a larger signal caller who can run. And then to the benching stuff, he completed 61.5% of his passes for 8.5 yards per attempt, 18 touchdowns, 5 interceptions, which is good. It's good, but it's not great. The problem is he had 6 big-time throws and 7 turnover-worthy plays. Very little of the offense was actually coming from him. He was basically just delivering the ball to pass catchers and hoping they could do something after the catch or create with their legs. And those numbers were actually better than his 2023 season where he played the whole time. He had 17 big-time throws but 22 turnover-worthy plays. The other thing to mention, Boston College went through a coaching change themselves. He did rush for over 1,000 yards in 23, but last year that output dropped significantly. And he took a sack on 27% of the pressures allowed, 18 sacks, and he didn't play the whole year. Held onto the ball for more than 3 seconds per dropback. Malzahn's going to have to correct that. We talk about interceptions and negative plays. Depending on the depth of your sacks can be as detrimental to your offense in sustaining drives and scoring as an interception. So that's something that definitely needs to be corrected. We'll see what they can do. Depth-wise, it doesn't look fantastic. Brock Glenn is back. He has a 45% completion percentage through his career. They do have a 4-star freshman in Kevin Sperry, but we saw that last year with Crumman Huck, which failed miserably. Hopefully he doesn't have to play. And they do have a low-level transfer in Jalen King from East Tennessee State. He should not be on the field. This whole quarterback room, and honestly, a lot of the offense is going to hinge on what they can coax out of Tommy Castellanos, unless they become a very heavy run-based team with the run game, which is possible. We've seen Malzahn do that too. Speaking of which, going to running back, they no longer have Swiss Army knife Lawrence Toafili. They do get back Roydell Williams from injury. He's a former Alabama 4-star, 5'10", 214. We barely saw him last year. He only had 57 rushing yards before he got hurt. But this is a guy that averaged over 5 yards per carry with Bama. Just a lot harder to play with the Crimson Tide than Florida State. So we'll see what he can do. There definitely is no lack of competition, though. They add Gavin Sawchuk from Florida State, another player who at the height of his career put up 610 rushing yards, 8 touchdowns, over 5.5 yards per carry, 5.8 actually. That was in 23, 11 yards of 15 plus. He's 5'11", 200 pounds. The only problem is he got beat out last year, even before injury kind of took most of his season from him. But even then, 4 stars, Cam Davis, Sam Singleton Jr. still on the team. Davis actually flashed a little bit in an atrocious situation. He was second on the team in rushing with 173 yards. He's 224 pounds. Singleton's 195. They also have a 4-star freshman in Usman Kroma, as well as Jalen Lucas coming back from injury, more of a special team gadget guy, but he could maybe fill in for some of the Toafili pass catching stuff coming out of the backfield. This is a much deeper running back room than last year. Hopefully it can just stay a little healthier, and the depth of Sawchuk plus returning 4-star should help bolster the depth with another year in the program. Wide receiver. So last year's unit was absolutely horrific. There should be no surprise that they're retooling the entire unit, starting with 3 transfers: Deuce Robinson from USC, Squirrel White from Tennessee, Gavin Blackwell from North Carolina. Much like Malik Benson, all 3 of these guys are a reclamation project in some form or another. I do think they're better than the transfers they added last year. Starting with Robinson, he's a former 5-star. He's only played 484 snaps the last 2 years, but the first thing I'll say is the receiving room at USC is a lot better than Florida State. He should get more snaps just based on lack of competition. And when he's been on the field, it's not like it's been because of bad play. It's literally because they have 5 stars. Robinson's 6'6", 220, caught 23 passes for 396 yards, so pretty efficient. Logged 1.98 yards per route, so very close to that 2.0 threshold. Plays in and out of the slot. He should immediately be an upgrade on everything they put on the field last year. Ashton Squirrel White. He's 5'10", 167, more of a slot receiver. His best season, 64 catches, 764 yards, 2.27 yards per route. That was under Joe Milton. Last year, his numbers dropped significantly. I would argue that was more of a Nico Iamaleava statistic than a Squirrel White statistic. Played in the slot 94% of the time. I think with better QB play, you're going to see a better Squirrel White. The question is, where does Tommy Castellanos fall on the Joe Milton to Nico Iamaleava scale? And that is something that remains to be seen. Gavin Blackwell is a former four-star with North Carolina. Never caught more than 17 passes in a season. Played out wide 96% of the time. Not even a yard per route run for him. He's awful. If he needs to play on the field, basically all of the freshmen we're going to talk about and all of the youth that are 4 and 5 stars have failed, as well as probably Robinson and White. That would be a disaster scenario. It's also one that's probably like a 1% outcome. So I'm not really worried about Blackwell. He should probably just be a depth veteran presence, hopefully catch up some of the youth, which is probably where the true ceiling lies for a wide receiver 3. We want one of these guys playing over Blackwell. They have former 4 stars, LaWayne McCoy, BJ Gibson, Elijah Moore, and Mekhi Danzy. All of them are second-year 4 stars. Some of them had to play a little bit more than others. LaWayne McCoy especially got a few snaps. These are players we should expect to beat out Blackwell. They also add a freshman 4-star in Javen Boggs. He's a player getting some hype as well. So you have 5 4 stars that are either second-year or first-year players. We need to see these guys get on the field. And this circles back to the GM, the people that are bringing in recruits and transfers. If these players can't get on the field, there's a problem. It's not your OC. Or maybe it is. If your OC can't develop them, that is a problem. But we need to start talking about the 4 stars that have departed this program. And there have been quite a few of them at the wide receiver position over the last couple of years. We can go back to 23. Hakeem Williams, the number 31 recruit in the class, 5-star. Where is he now? He's on a new team. What about before then? We have some players going all the way back to like Destin Hill. A little bit of an injury situation with him, but where is he now? He's on a new team. Where's Malik McClain? He was a 4-star, the number 270. Where is he? He's on Arizona State. So eventually you got to ask the question, if these 4 stars can't get on the field, are we actually bringing in good players? But anyway, there's no doubt that this receiver room is upgraded from last year. Tight end, they bring in a couple transfers, Randy Pittman Jr. and Marqueston Douglas. Douglas is familiar with the program, having played here 3 years before his stop at Arizona State. So immediately you're more deep than last year just by default with the guys you brought in. But the position is going to start with 4-star sophomore Landon Thomas, was forced into action probably a little more than deserved last year. But for being a guy who's relatively undersized as a freshman, 6'4", 235, he stood up as a blocker a little better than I thought he would, caught 14 passes. An overall pretty efficient season considering what he was playing around. And Randy Pittman comes over from UCF, familiar with Malzahn, of course, 6'2", 225. Another player, willing blocker despite his size. He can play in and out of the slot, had 32 catches last year for over 400 yards. And then Douglas, he's going to be your big 6th offensive lineman. He's 275. Played well his first 3 years here before he left for a season. They also bring in Chase Lofton, a 4-star tight end. He's a freshman. There have been a lot of good reports about him potentially seeing the field too. So no doubt this position is deeper. Offensive line, like receiver, they're basically retooling the entire unit after how bad last year was. Reminiscent of the Dalvin Cook days when that offensive line was a complete sieve. But there's a couple things that they did that are really good, and I think will bring them better, make them better. The question is, average play or above average play? Or like top 20 play? That would be a stretch. But first, at left tackle, they addressed the position by bringing in 3-year Vanderbilt starter Gunnar Hansen. Over 2,100 snaps to his name. He's been pretty bad on them. He still has yet to even reach average play, but a little bit better as a pass blocker. Only allowed 1 sack last year, but 18 pressures. He's an upgrade regardless of anything else. Right tackle, they also bring in a 3-year starter from Ole Miss, Micah Pettis. He played 2,091 snaps, 18 pressures, and 1 sack as well, but a little bit better as a pass blocker. These are going to be your stalwarts on the edges unless there's a recruit that jumps up or another transfer. They did have a couple depth ones. Jaylene Matthews comes over from Rutgers. Some services had him as a 4-star. Some has him as a high 3. He's actually a freshman. They flipped him after the spring. Josh Raymond from Vanderbilt, he's a redshirt freshman. Some think he'll play the interior. But they do have former 4-stars, Lucas Simmons, Jonathan Daniels, incoming 4-star Chasten Brown. This tackle group is definitely not worse, but I have a similar concern to the receiver group. Like if Lucas Simmons and Jonathan Daniels aren't playing at some point, like what are we spending our recruiting 4-stars on? Like how are these guys not on the field? They're young, so we're not there yet, but it's at least a question that's been raised after they've lost some players and failed to develop them. A lot of their best players have come from low-level competition via transfer. At guard, Richie Leonard's back. Nothing wrong with him from last year. He just got hurt in week 4. He was solid when he played, and he's played 775 snaps. That came from 23, only 16 pressures allowed. He was good before the injury, so no question at that position. The other guard spot is Adrian Medley. He comes from UCF, familiar with Malzahn. Only 12 pressures to his name last year and 815 snaps. That's excellent. Luke Pettitbon from Wake Forest, starting center there for 2 years, only 6 pressures. The interior is awesome. The tackle position, I think, is pretty good with room for a ceiling, depending on how some of the young players maybe play, if they could beat out one of the incumbent starters. But interior, not as deep, but still very good. As far as depth, former Harvard starter Jacob Rizzi still back. They have a couple 4-stars. Manasseh Etete, Mario Nash Jr. They're from the last 2 recruiting cycles. This unit should at least be average. Defensive line, they basically lose everybody who played a snap off the edge. The first thing they did was move Amari Williams back to the edge after playing tight end. He's a 4-star recruit. Just a little frustrating that he lost a year of development playing a different position. So we'll see what he offers them. His 148 snaps are basically useless to this discussion because they were at tight end. They go out and add James Williams from Nebraska, Diamante Diggs from Coastal Carolina, and Jason Jenkins from Tennessee. Williams originally came to Nebraska via JUCO, and somehow this guy had 31 pressures on 188 snaps. Talk about just crazy productive when he was on the field. Nebraska was super deep off the edge. So now for Florida State, all we need is James Williams to extrapolate that over to a larger sample. Diggs originally played with Youngstown State before he went to Coastal Carolina last year. He was pretty good, 23 pressures, above average across the board. Now he'll have to bring that to the ACC, easier said than done. And then Jenkins from Tennessee played a rotational role, only 4 QB pressures, but he's more of a run stuffer, like a 5-10 technique, 281 pounds. So we'll see what he can do. Maybe he plays outside on early downs, rundowns, and kicks inside to the interior for pass rushing snaps. They do have a pair of freshmen, LeJesse Harold and Daryl Desir. Desir, one of 2 Desirs. He's got a twin on the team as well. He's just the higher recruit. They're 4-stars who will play the edge. A lot of people saying Desir is going to get on the field this year as well as his brother. And then they have 4-star Tyon Lee, who's 270. He might play inside. He also might play outside. It kind of remains to be seen where he slots in. I think they're not quite as deep on the interior, so maybe they have him gain even more weight. I know he's been gaining a ton of weight to begin with. Inside, they do return Daryl Jackson Jr. and Daniel Lyons. Jackson played 488 snaps last year. He actually led the team with 30 pressures at 330 pounds. So we know he can defend the run, and now he just needs some help, really. Lyons is 295. He was above average as well, but much better as a run defender compared to the pass rusher. They bring in Deontay McRae from Western Kentucky. He's a 2-year starter there. Really good run defender. 20 pressures last year was an improvement. And then they have freshman Kevin Wynn, who's another 4-star in addition to Tyon Lee. Linebacker, they do return their top 3, led by 4-star junior Blake Nicholson. He was 3rd on the team in tackles last year, around average overall. His biggest struggle came in coverage, 20 completions on 24 targets, but another year in the program. He was a young 4-star, so there's potential. Kind of the same with Omar Graham. He played 390 snaps, 37 tackles, allowed 13 catches on 18 targets, so just played a little less than Nicholson. A lot of the same problems, better in the run game than the pass. And then finally, Justin Cryer's back after 274 snaps. A lot of the same numbers, a little bit better in coverage, but they addressed this position in the portal. Stephen Thompson from Nebraska, Elijah Herring from Memphis, Caleb Lavalley from North Carolina. Thompson has started a lot. He played with Syracuse. He has over 1,600 snaps to his name. When he transferred to Nebraska, he only got on the field for 175 on that deep defense. But still, he's continued to play solid even on the small sample. And I think it says something that your DC Bring Stephen Thompson with you. Also brought James Williams off the edge with him. So these are players, the Nebraska transfers, that know this system already. Elijah Herring has had a weird career. He started at Tennessee and actually started, but he was okay, nothing great. To get, I guess, more opportunity, he transferred down to Memphis. He didn't get a ton more, but he did get 710 snaps. He was better down there, fourth on the team in tackles. That makes sense. Your efficiency jumps with a lower level of competition, and now he's coming back up. Biggest concern for him is also coverage, 33 completions on 41 targets. We'll see how he does. Lavallee only has 127 snaps. He should be a depth piece. At corner, all of the corners are gone, including Thomas, who was one of those draft picks last year, one of the few, and Fentrell Cypress as well. They did add Jeremiah Wilson from Houston. He played 557 snaps, former Syracuse player, only 45% completion, 4 interceptions, 5 PBUs. He should immediately start. The other corner positions up for grabs. Quindarius Jones played the most out of the incumbents that are back. 256 snaps, 47% completion, 4 PBUs, actually pretty good. Jabril Rawls played 137 snaps. Not quite as good as Quindarius Jones. They also have a couple 4-star redshirt freshmen that were expected to do something. Charles Lester III and Kai Bates both played a handful of snaps last year, and there was a lot of hype on Lester, but he got a DUI this offseason, so I'm not sure how FSU will punish that. They just said they'll handle it internally. See if he gets, the Mike Gundy punishment and they put him on the field every snap, or if he's suspended. Just not sure how that will go. At nickel, Edwin Joseph played 188 snaps last year. Pretty good in coverage too, but we didn't see him take a step forward during the spring because he got hurt. That actually opened the door for Ricky Knight III to receive some more opportunities in the spring. They do have a couple 4-stars, Jamari Howard, Gregory Xavier Thomas, and Shamar Arnu on the roster from the last 2 recruiting cycles. Maybe one of them can take a step forward with their high recruiting pedigrees. After they replace all their corners, they do have both safeties back. Shyheim Brown, he's been a 3-year starter for this team, led the team with 70 tackles, good in coverage, only 141 yards. He's a good returning starter. KJ Kirkland is the other 473 tackles for him. He was a little bit more of a liability in coverage, allowed an 80% completion percentage, but kept a lot in front of him, only 173 yards. They do have former 4-stars. Conrad Hussey played 190 snaps. Earl Little Jr. played 179. JUCO product, Ashlyn Barker's on the team. He played 135. They also brought a transfer, Jarvis Boatwright. We'll see how this group shakes out, but it would be a surprise to see anyone usurp Kirkland or Brown. The best case scenario for those depth pieces is maybe one of them goes into the slot. We mentioned the change in kicker. They will break in a new one this year, Jake Weinberg. He kicked a little bit against Charleston Southern, 1 extra point, 1 short field goal. We know he has a strong leg. We've seen the social media clips of him hitting the 70-yarder in practice where there's no one on the field. He's kicking off, it's an artificial tee. It's not someone holding for him. So we'll see how that goes. We've heard this story many times with many teams. A guy can hit 70 yards. Like, all right, let's see him in a game with pressure around him, and we'll see how it goes. So complete unknown at kicker, but a very good special teams unit nonetheless last year. They should return some of that magic. Let's get to the schedule and talk about what to expect this year. As usual, schedule is the most important factor to how these teams do. You can ask Indiana and see how that goes. Non-con is not easy. They have a barbell approach to this. They play Florida, they play them away, and they play Alabama in their opener. Those are the bookends of your schedule, first and your last game. In between, you have East Texas A&M and Kent State. Those should be 2 automatic wins, but you're going to be an underdog against Bama and Florida as long as your season plays somewhat according to preseason expectations. Bye week is also bad. It's after week 2, in between your 2 easiest games. Worst time to possibly have a bye early in the season against 2 awful teams. From there, in the ACC, things are a little bit better for this team. This conference does have some higher-end talent on the top end, and Florida State's going to face a lot of that. They're playing Miami and Clemson. They do play some teams at the bottom, Wake Forest, Stanford, and Virginia. They're going to be clear favorites over those teams. The ceiling of this schedule comes down to how they perform against Virginia Tech, Pittsburgh, and NC State. Florida State was a tick below those teams last year. If they're a tick above or right in the middle, this team is going to barely scratch a bowl. However, if they can get ahead of those teams and actually play close against Clemson and Miami, I think you're looking at a team that could win upwards of like 8-9 games. Personally, the way we have them rated right now, they would be clear underdogs in 4 games this year. making their max win total outside of a crazy upset at 8. But again, there is room for improvement. A lot of that comes down to some of these top 20 recruiting classes. Can we get something out of them other than a goodbye in the portal? We'll see. Right now, I would peg Florida State. 7.5 wins is where I would put the win total, which is a little higher than expectations from the books. We'll see how it goes. Until next time, let me know who you guys want to see next. We'll be back a little bit later. Until then, good luck.